Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. In this week's episodes, we're going to break down who has the best tools among Orioles prospects. We're going to start with part one of this episode and discuss the hitters before shifting over to the pitchers in our second episode later this week. That's all coming up on Orioles on the Verge, which is brought to you by Bet Online. The biggest betting weekend of the year is finally here, which means more updated odds and props for Super Sunday. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. We have hundreds of prop bets, MVP odds, and exclusive in-game live betting. BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline offers you everything and more to enhance your game day experience. Visit the website today, make game the day action count a little bit more. BetOnline, the game starts here. Now, we do have a little bit of exciting news here at Orioles on the Verge. We've been hearing a lot of feedback from our listeners that they want merch. We haven't had a steady supply of merch in a while. The good news that Bob is about to deliver is that we might have found something.
Yeah, I just got the sample. I had to buy a couple first, just to make sure the quality was good, that the printing turned out all right, and it did. I got a long sleeve and a short sleeve shirt. Happy the way they turned out. I'll be wearing them as often as possible, and you can too by following the link that we will provide on social media, and I'll put it on the show notes for this podcast as well.
We're going to roll out even more merch, but for now, you can find shirts with our new logo and a couple of vintage shirts. Shirts with older variations of our logo, which we recently redid. Now, let's dive into tonight's topic, which is the best tools among Orioles prospects. As you've probably heard us discuss here in the last few weeks, we are pretty much in prospect list season right now. We're rolling out our top 50 to members of our Patreon community, and we're going to have the whole top 50 up here on the show in a few weeks. But we wanted to take some time to highlight the individual traits that some players have that really jump out at us. And for this episode, we're going to talk about the hitters. We're going to talk about who has the best power, the best hit tool, the best speed, best glove, and the best arm on defense. And let's start with best power. I think we have two really strong contenders for this category. I'll go to Nick to see which one he picked.
I'd imagine all three of us have the same answer for this one. I've got Coby Mayo by a pretty healthy margin right now. 90th percentile exit velo is 106 against righties, almost 107 against righties, and almost 110 against the lefties. That was AAA last year, but 107 overall, 90th percentile, topped out at 115. And to put that into just context here, that would have ranked 115 peak exit velo would have ranked top, lost it here. Would have ranked top 30, in Major League Baseball last season. So just ahead of guys like Marcell Ozuna, Austin Riley, Rafael Devers, big boppers we all know. Some we love, some we hate. Higher than any Orioles hitter last year. I think Santander was like 114. So Coby Mayo got him by a mile per hour. I think it's Mayo and Basayo are in that top tier, but I think Mayo is pretty comfortably ahead of Basayo. But Basayo's not even an adult yet. He's not even 21. So we'll see what his numbers look like in AAA this year, but it's Mayo for right now.
Yeah, I also went with Mayo just because I think he's more matured. He's starting to get into that grown man strength, even though he's still very young. Nick read off the exit velocities, and I think he was interviewed somewhat recently and asked about the new dimensions in left field and seemed to be salivating over that, which, yeah, I get it. He could have cleared Baltimore or whatever you want to call it, but hey, if you don't have to hit it quite as far, just means more home runs are going to go out. Yeah, he's just got that humongous power from the right-hand side. Basayo, obviously, I think was the second choice, but like Nick said, he still has time to grow into more power and be able to tap into it in games more often. I think Mayo can already do that. Thomas Sosa, he might be coming for this crown a year from now, but for now, it's a dollop of Mayo, as Bobby Jones said in the Discord.
Yeah, I go with Mayo in this spot as well. I think Basayo has closed the gap a little bit in the last year, but I still go with Mayo for all of the data that Nick rattled off. And what just jumps out at me is that he has that BP power in game. You look at some of the home runs he's hit in the last 2 years at Norfolk. A couple that stand out in memory for me. One he hit out of the ballpark at Jacksonville. Another one that I think either went over or hit off the video board in Worcester. He's hit some real shots in Norfolk in the last few years. And I'm fully confident that even if it takes a little bit of time for him to adjust to major league pitching, when he gets back to Baltimore, the power is going to show up in his first full season.
Yeah, you look at down further even. I mean, there are some other guys coming up too that have some pretty impressive power. Like Bob mentioned Thomas Sosa there. He's got what, 107, 108, 90th percentile exit velos, multiple hits over 110 miles per hour last season. And because he is let's say very confident in his abilities in everything he does. I don't know if either of you guys saw this. I think it was yesterday. He posted a video on social media. Someone put together for a nice little preseason hype video. His player page, he's listed at 160, but in the beginning of the video, he steps on a scale and he's 220 of like, he is growing into his grown man body. I'm 10 pounds lighter, 10, 15 pounds lighter than him. And don't look like Thomas Sosa at all. I'll say that. I think Thomas Sosa, the game power wasn't there for him this year. As we've talked about like all the time, whenever we talked about Sosa, he was very raw last year, but I think we see a power surge out of him this year. Jud Fabian, I think, is up there in that next tier. Creed Willems, I think, is in that next tier. Steven Martinez, he's already tapping into his game power.
Jordan Sanchez.
Yeah, it's the raw power. There's some big time guys. And I think some of them, Jud Fabian's already tapped into it, but I'm curious to see these guys who have that, 60, 70 grade raw power, who starts turning that into game power. Vance Honeycutt, didn't even mention him. I think some have him. I've seen anywhere between 50 and 70 on a lot of national outlets, but he's in there as well. There's some big boppers coming up through the system.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fabian, if he can make contact, the ball goes far and he hits it hard. It's just a matter of making contact, but that's not what we're talking about with this category. So yeah, I like it. A lot of home run hitters, a lot of guys that impact the ball. That's what the Orioles look out for. And I think they found some guys that are able to do that.
We'll go now to best overall hit tool. And there are a few players that could claim this mantle and guys with completely different kinds of profiles. Someone like Enrique Bradfield Jr. would have a case here because he rarely swings and misses. Samuel Basallo has really developed into a refined all-around hitter. He might end up taking this one, but there's a few others in the mix. So, Bob, I'll start with you. Who do you have for best hit tool in the system?
I do have Samuel Basallo as having the best hit tool, which is kind of crazy when you consider that he's probably going to end up with as much, if not more power than Mayo when all is said and done. The last category we talked about, but it was John Mioli's article in the Baltimore Banner that really pushed me over the edge of like, okay, yeah, it's more than just, he's got power and he can run into the ball. No, he's almost, what was it? He's too good at making contact that he needs to learn to lay off the pitches that he can't do as much damage with, which we know swing decisions, that's what the Orioles preach, and they'll refine that. So for me, it was Basallo. It was Griffo Farrell was on the tip of my tongue here. Bradfield was an option as well, but I had to give it to Basallo since he's a beast. He's so good in so many categories, and I gave it to Mayo for the power. I wanted to give Basallo the contact.
I like it when you include power in there. Yeah, I think Basallo, pitch recognition, all of that. It's certainly one of his many impressive tools. I gave Basallo a different winner in this category later on in the rundown as well. So for hit tool, spread the wealth a little bit. Genuinely, these guys all deserve this, I think. I gave the slight edge to Enrique Bradfield just because we've seen him do it in full season ball already in the pro ranks. So that's why it's a little bit easier, I think, for me to rank him at the very top. Just when you look at like swinging strike rate, overall strikeout rate, he's one of the best in the organization. Contact rate's good. Chase rates are very good. Like we saw what he did last year. We saw the improvements that he made. We saw the growth that he made. But yeah, I have Griffo Farrell a very, very close second. And I honestly think by the end of the year, I'm warming up to a Farrell. I still think the Joey Ortiz comps are a little much, but I am warming up heavily to Griffo Farrell. And I think by the end of the year, depending on who they draft, of course, a lot of draft picks coming in, I think Griffo Farrell could be up here at the top as having the best hit tool in this system. Just because if you go back to his last year's college numbers, he had a 7.5% strikeout rate in the ACC. And I think when you look at swinging strike rate, overall strike rate, the walk rate was going up in pro ball this year, but I think he's going to be right there with Enrique Bradfield in some of those categories. And if you include power in this, Bradfield's power numbers decreased as he went through his time at Vanderbilt. Griffo Farrell had a career high 5 home runs last year at UVA, and I think a lot of those were bunched at the beginning of the year, but he showed more power last year than he ever has. So it's still like below average power, but can he maybe I have a bigger belief in Griffo Farrell tapping into a smidge of power than I do for Bradfield, who was just lean into your strengths at this point. Don't worry about the power. So I think Griffo Farrell is going to run into a few more home runs each year. So I think by the end of the year, Griffo Farrell probably takes this honor.
Jordan Westbrook 2.0.
I considered O'Farrell. I considered Bradfield. I think that if you want to look at someone who could really take a big step forward in this area this season, keep your eye on Aaron Estrada. But I went with Samuel Basallo for this. I just think that what Basallo does in his ability to make contact with that kind of power is impressive. And here's what jumps out at me the most about Basallo. Last year at Bowie, 16 home runs in 106 games. Strikeout rate of under 20%, 19.1% strikeout rate to go to 9.2% walk rate. And if you look at his minor league career so far, he's been able to pretty consistently sustain strikeout rates that are 20% or lower, aside from his late season cameo at Norfolk last year. If he continues to do that as he moves up, there's some real Yordan Alvarez kind of traits here that you just don't see very often in players. And I really just feel like what Basallo has to offer, the ability to make contact, to hit the ball as hard as he does, and to not strike out that often is pretty significant.
Yeah, completely agree. If I could also shout out Ryan Stafford, I think is a guy that has a really, really good hit tool. Ellis Cuevas, Frederick Bencosme, Aaron Estrada. These are guys I think that can, the batting averages might not match up, but like a guy like Frederick Bencosme, he can basically hit the ball at will. It's just a matter of can he hit it hard enough to get a hit out of it. But yeah, for me, it's like we talked about, it's Basallo just because he's going to put the bat on the ball and more often than not, it's going for extra bases.
It's wild that Basallo, as a 16-year-old, and when I was doing, our top 50 prospect update episodes over on Patreon, and I'm doing Steven Martinez, and I kind of did the comparison there between Steven Martinez's numbers as a 16-year-old in the DSL and Samuel Basallo's numbers as a 16-year-old in the DSL. And you see this basically 21% strikeout rate for Basallo in the DSL. Last year in AA, and it's 450 plate appearances, he struck out 19% of the time. So nearly 2% lower strike rate in AA than he did in the DSL. He did that as a 19-year-old kid. Is he striking out 22% of the time in AAA this year? Maybe. So what is he? He's a sub 25% easily when he gets to the big leagues. He's striking out less than 25% of the time. He's probably going to walk 8-9% of the time, 10% on a really good year. It's just the all around bat, man. It's going to be so special, and I can't wait. I hope I don't think he comes up by the end of the year. Well, I think he comes up at the very end of the year, but I hope by halfway through the year he's forcing the Orioles' hand here.
Yeah, I mean, when he's a seasoned, grizzled veteran at 23 and he's putting up 10% plus walk rates and 15 to 16% strikeout rates and controlling the zone, we might have the next Juan Soto, Yordan Alvarez combo.
We'll go over now to best speed. And I think that there's one prospect that comes to mind when we talk about speed. I should point out that there are some strong contenders other than Enrique Bradfield Jr., but I kind of have a feeling it's going to be a clean sweep here. Nick, am I right?
I mean, Enrique Bradfield is the only prospect in all of baseball to have 280 grades, according to Baseball America, and one of those is speed, and 80 is as high as you get. So yeah, I think it's Bradfield, but I like Austin Overn's entering the organization. We haven't seen it across a full season, but he's entering as 70 grade speed. And when you look at speed and just not the ability to steal bases, or not just like how quick you are on the base path, but your ability to steal bags as well. Like Tavian Josenberger and Douglas Hodo were really, really good at stealing bases last year. Douglas Hodo was 51 and 58 in stolen base attempts last year, and Josenberger was 50 for 56 in stolen base attempts last year. So I think if you got Bradfield at 80 speed, Overn at 70 speed, Josenberger and Hodo probably just a tick below that. Yeah. Although I do wonder, I would like to see a race. He's not a prospect at all. I don't even know if he's still in the organization, to be
Luis
honest.
Valdez.
Yeah. I want Bradfield and Valdez to have a race and see who's fastest there. But
Yeah, I was just about to bring up Luis Valdez. I think he's still in the organization, but yeah, he's the only guy I could see competing in a foot race. Obviously, you named some other fast guys. Honeycutt, I don't know if he's quite there, but another quick guy. Not sure who the big from the international prospects coming up, like who's got that real stolen base speed. Maybe shit, I don't know. Let's go with Emilio Sanchez. I keep getting Emilio Sanchez and Amelia Perez mixed up, the Oscar contending film, because they're so similar. But yeah, speed, easy choice. It's Bradfield. He's going to steal 100 plus bases a year, basically, in the major leagues once he gets here. And yeah, Nick, in his excellent 25 predictions for 25, said 80 plus steals in 2025 season for Bradfield. And I think that's pretty safe bet.
Yeah, he's got Roberto Mercado as his manager for probably at least half the season, and he's got 80 grade speed. He's definitely going to be stealing 80 bases this year. It's yeah, there's a lot of players. You guys mentioned them: Josenberger, Overn, Honeycutt, Valdez, who have a case here. But I feel like Bradfield, not just the speed, but the instincts that he shows on the bases, knowing when to run, being able to get the jumps that he has, is going to help him out a lot. And that's why I still feel like when you look at Bradfield's profile, yes, there are questions about whether or not he's going to hit the ball hard enough as he moves up the ranks. But everything else in that skill set, the speed and the defense, are going to play.
Maybe Colin Burns could be up there too.
you're never going to leave that one go. I want to throw another name out there too. That he's right there with the power. He's may or may not win any of our votes here for glove, but I'm sure he's going to be up there as well. Judd Fabian. Again, I mean, Judd Fabian's got 60 plus grade speed. Dylan Beavers is quick on the base paths as well. Like, you're drafting athletes, and it seems like the last like 2 drafts. I know we've had comments on, I love the draft. I love getting all the information out there, the videos, the stats, anything I can find there right after the draft. And I swear the number of people who commented last year, like, let me guess, one of the fastest players in this draft class. Like, yep, you got it. That's a pretty common thing. Like the last 2 years, every other hitter the Orioles seem to draft, it's like, yeah, he's one of the fastest players in this draft class. They're gearing up for this new style of baseball. And I think you're seeing some guys who are going to settle in pretty well up there.
Reed Trimble, pre-injuries, was like one of those types of players. I don't know about it anymore.
I don't know if you guys were aware of this. I became aware of it when I did Trimble's Patreon episode. It's part of our countdown. He has yet to be caught stealing in his professional career. A lot of injuries along the way, so he's never even played a full season, but still pretty impressive.
I did notice that, and yeah, that is very impressive. I hope he can go his whole minor league career and major league career with that record intact.
Let's go in now to what I think is going to be a pretty competitive category, and that is best glove. And this goes hand in hand with what Nick was just talking about a minute ago with prioritizing speed in the draft. And as part of that, the Orioles really have put a premium on defense, whether it's been some of their picks in center field like Bradfield, Fabian, or Vance Honeycutt. You can even look at Griff O'Farrell's glove work at shortstop and make a case for him in this category. So there's a lot of players to consider, not to mention a few catchers that might have a claim here. But I think we know that there's probably distinct tiers with this group. And Nick, I'm curious to see who you have at the top.
for best fielder, Enrique Bradfield Jr. does have A grade fielding as well. You look at Baseball America, but you got to include the arm. And I know we're going to talk about the arm specifically next, but I include that as well. And Bradfield does not have the strongest arm in this system. So I think I'm looking at either Vance Honeycutt or Jed Fabian for best fielder. Like Fabian is electric in the outfield. I know we've mentioned this a couple of times before, especially throughout last season. I just don't think, and maybe it's because of the swing and miss with the bat, I don't think Fabian gets enough credit for the speed, for the defense, and everything else that he does on the field. When you have that glaring hole of the hit tool, it's understandable. But yeah, I'm saying Fabian or Honeycutt. I mean, again, Honeycutt was in the conversation to be the number 1 overall pick this time last year. And his defense, it was a big reason why down there at UNC. So as far as like outfielders go, I don't think we have the, elite infielder. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree with that. Griff O'Farrell probably coming up. He's got a really, really good glove, but I don't know if we have that elite, like this is a bona fide future Gold Glove, infielder. Griff O'Farrell is probably the closest to that. A lot of these stronger defenders are the outfielders. And a lot of them are now in AA and AAA, pushing for the major leagues right now.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. And I think that's probably okay right now, just because we have Gunnar, Westberg, Holiday, et cetera, et cetera. So not quite
Ramon
as
Arias.
necessary. Yeah, of course. How could I forget? But yeah, I had to go outfield as well. I was going to say Bradfield, but I wanted to spread the love as much as possible, and I put him for fastest player. So I went with Honeycutt as my top defender, but could have easily been Fabian. Could have easily been a guy like Austin O'Verne. Again, speed kills out there. It could have been, and I want to say this just to piss off Mark in a Discord, Patreon, Dylan Beavers. No, it couldn't have been Dylan Beavers. I don't know if he's as bad as maybe some people think, but Griff O'Farrell for the infield. If you want to say Silas Ardoin or Ardway as for the catcher, Maverick Hanley, Douglas Hodo. Like, yeah, there's plenty of options, but it was really, for me, it was between Fabian, Bradfield, and Honeycutt. And I went with Honeycutt just to spread the love around, not make the obvious pick.
I was really torn between Fabian, Bradfield, and Honeycutt, and in the end, I went for Bradfield. Just everything with him in center field. I know the arm. I think Nick is right that if you're going to look at the arm and factor that in, Honeycutt and Fabian would have an edge. But I kind of separated the arm out of the equation for me and just looked at what they can do in the position. And all three of them are going to stick in center field as they move up. There's no question. But what Bradfield can do with his speed, his ability to run the ball down the gaps, to me is significant. You look at Cedric Mullins at his best, and I would argue that Bradfield is going to be a tick or two better than that. I just think that his speed is better than Mullins was at its best, and that the range is just very, very good. And again, going back to what I talked about earlier with his instincts on the bases, he has those same instincts in center field. He's not going to get cheated on a ball. So I went with Bradfield here, but it's a close call.
Yeah. I go back to this whole thing about fielding and the infield, and it really wasn't until this afternoon when I was really looking at this. Like, there really isn't. Is Freddie Bencosme the best defensive infielder prospect wise in the organization right now?
He might be. I mean, Leandro Arias pretty solid. Like, there's a bunch of guys that aren't going to hurt you, but like, is there a guy that's like, oh, we need that glove out in the field to save some runs? I don't know. You might be right there. I mean, maybe some of the younger guys like Elvin Garcia, he might be decent. We haven't really got a chance to see too much Jose Pena, but yeah, I think you might be right. It's like Griff O'Farrell, Frederick Bencosme, and outfielders.
Yeah, there was not. I mean, O'Farrell was the only infielder I really considered here. From the video we had from the DSL last year, I really like Emilio Sanchez at shortstop. I think that for his age, he shows a pretty advanced feel for the position, but it's still short of being in this conversation for me. So when Sanchez is in Delmarva, which will probably be 2026, we'll get a good look at him there. And I think that by that point, he will be in the conversation. But what I'm wondering as we're talking about this, do you think that the reason that there's not a standout infielder defensively, which is a real departure from a few years ago when Joey Ortiz was always in this conversation, is because the Orioles like to move their infielders around so much? I mean, Frederick Bencosme played primarily, well, mostly second base up until last year. Then they started to play him at shortstop more. Aaron Estrada moves around a lot. There's just a lot of guys that can play multiple positions. And I don't know that the Orioles have quite zeroed in on, okay, we're going to draft the best defensive shortstop, the best defensive third baseman we can find. Instead, it's been moving players around. And then if they happen to look really good and stick at one position the way that Jackson Holliday looks like he's going to be able to play second base at the major league level, that's great. But otherwise, they want them to be versatile.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Jackson Holliday locked down for hopefully a couple of years here when the breakout happens in 2025. You've got Gunnar Henderson locked down for a couple more years. I know people are already counting down the days until he's no longer an Oriole, but he's going to be around for a few more years. You've got Jordan Westbrook on this infield. So, yeah, I guess this is an opportunity, these past couple of drafts, to really just stock that outfield. Go after some high profile bats and maybe not worry about the gloves as much. But I feel like maybe that's why the Griffo Farrell pick, I feel like that was a good explanation by John Mioli last time he was on. What he kind of said, hey, you need one of these guys who he may not excel at everything, but like he's going to get the job done just as you want it done. Defensively, offensively, he's a grinder. He's going to be there to help kind of stabilize these things, take over after, Anthony Servideo and Carter Young are no longer in the organization probably. Yeah, it's just an interesting note. I'm not concerned at all about that either when this infield is so good and so young. Haven't even talked about Kobe Mayo and where is he going to play, but he's in there as well. So, yeah, I'm not concerned at all. It's just something interesting going through the system.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And everything the Orioles do, there's a reason they're doing it the way they do it, even if we don't know why. So, yeah, I think maybe they just think that outfield defense is a better priority for the time being, especially because we have the guys in place. But also, I don't know, maybe they figure on the infield it's better to just be adequate and have a good bat versus in the outfield the defense is more important. Who knows? But I'm sure the team does.
Let's wrap up the position player side of this conversation with best arm. Now, we've kind of touched on the players that you would expect to be up for consideration in this category already with their conversation, not just about best glove, but a little bit in best speed. It came up there too. So this category, I think you've got a lot of players who are in the mix that could be chosen, but I know that there's probably one or two in particular that stand out. So, Bob, I'll let you start. Who do you have for best arm in the system?
This is where I put Jud Fabian, and that's the difference between him and Bradfield. Bradfield definitely faster. I mean, they can both go chase balls down and get them, but Fabian, he's got a strong arm. It's accurate from center field. Like he might not have the pure strongest arm as far as like velocity from the outfield, but I think when you combine the accuracy, it's the guy that if there's a fly ball with the runner on third, you got to cut him down at home to win the game. Fabian's my guy to get the job done right now in this moment. Plenty of other contenders, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but yeah, Fabian was my pick.
I remember a game last year in AA where it was, I think, game on the line, winning run at third base, and he gunned him down at home plate. It was an amazing play. I also think too, some of that is like Bradfield just has such elite speed where I can't tell you, I can't give a grade here on like his jumps and how well he reads the ball. Most of his games came last year in Aberdeen where half the outfield is like you can't see it on their cameras. So can't really say that. But Fabian, I just feel like he reads the ball so well off the bat that whatever he lacks in speed, and he's not lacking in speed at all, but like comparing to Bradfield, he makes up for it and getting good jumps on the ball. But for my best arm, I went with Samuel Basallo. I don't have updated numbers from last year, but I was looking through some other things that I had written down here. And this was a note from, I think this time last year, So Basayo was pushing sub 2.0 pop times, and the note says, so I don't know which article this is directly from, sorry, but the note I copy and pasted here onto my notes just said Basayo's arm strength. This was a quote from a scout. Basayo's arm strength matches or exceeds Adley's already. So yeah, I think I've seen some outlets have it as like a 70 grade arm there behind the plate. I'd be interested to know just how hard he throws from behind the plate now, a year later, what that number looks like.
As would I.
I considered Basayo here. I thought about Kobe Mayo, but I don't, I know that the conversation now has kind of shifted towards him playing first base. So this really came down for me between Fabian and Honeycutt. And I give Fabian a slight edge because, one, we've seen the arm in pro ball. We know how good it is. And I agree with both of you. The strength does not necessarily jump out at you, which is why I think some outlets have graded Fabian in a 55 arm. But I go more along Fangraph's line of thinking that it's a 60 grade arm because it is so accurate. And it seems like he can really throw the ball from just about any spot in the outfield. And it's just something that really jumps out at me with him. It is possible that Honeycutt does have the better arm. So 6 months from now, I might have a different answer to this question, but I give Fabian the slight edge for now.
I like it. Yeah, I almost went like a Thomas Sosa or Steven Martinez just because I think these guys, they have strong arms for right fielders, and I feel like in a couple of years they could be like real weapons out there, but couldn't justify it at the end of the day over a guy like Fabian.
Yeah. One other guy, some of the younger guys we just have no data on, and most of them we have no film on. But one guy I'm going to be watching, I would love more information about, is DJ Layton. Because if a lot of reports seem to think that he can stick at shortstop, and I know when he was in high school, he was also a pitcher, throwing 95, 96 miles per hour, I think. That could be another guy. Maybe that's one of your guys talking about infielders and arms and defense. DJ Layton could be a nice surprise coming up through the system. Maybe some of these high school kids, Andrew Tess, the catcher, I know he was lauded for his defensive abilities. So maybe they're going younger with those skill set on the infield, and we'll see what they do this year in their first years.
That does it for this look at the best tools among the position players in the Orioles farm system. We'll be back later on this week to break down the best tools among the pitchers in the farm system. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to our Patreon community and sign up to become a member today at the $3, $5, or $10 level to have access to our full Top 50 Prospects Countdown and more content that we will have in store for our patrons during the regular season. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by BetOnline and part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we continue our conversation about the best tools in the farm system as we focus on Orioles pitching prospects. And among the categories we'll discuss tonight include best fastball, best changeup, best breaking ball, best control, and best pitch mix. And there's a lot of good arms to cover in this conversation. So we'll get into that tonight on tonight's episode of Orioles on the Verge, which is brought to you by BetOnline. The biggest betting weekend of the year is finally here, which means more updated odds and props for Super Sunday. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. We have hundreds of prop bets, MVP odds, and exclusive in-game live betting. BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline offers you everything and more to enhance your game day experience. Visit the website today and make the game day action count a little bit more. BetOnline, the game starts here. Now, I did want to plug this, which is an interesting article over on our Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com, that Nick posted earlier this week with his 25 prospect predictions for 2025. Nick, can you give us a little sample of what readers can expect in that article?
Let's pull it up real quick. I already forgot what I wrote. Yeah, I was just kind of looking around, didn't write anything last week. So looking around for some inspiration, and it came from Jake Real over at MLB.com. He wrote a piece it's like a month ago at this point, but I linked it in our Substack piece, 25 Orioles predictions for 2025 season. And he had some good ones. So I said, let's go a prospect version. So, Kobe Mayo, how many home runs is he going to hit? Talking about some pitchers that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, but Michael Ferret, Cameron Weston, who wins some of these pitching awards, who gets added to the 40-man roster at the end of the year. Just some fun ideas that I had floating around. We'll see how many come true. I imagine like 3 of the 25 do, because that's how this goes. But it was a fun article to write here in February, as there's just nothing going on, and scrounging for things to look at, talk about, wait while the Orioles make a move. A little daydream about what these prospects can do in 2025.
Yeah, it was a great article idea and a great predictions as well. But I know nothing's happening, but I think that's going to end soon. About a week to 10 days from now, it's going to be news every day. We'll have our pick of the litter.
Yeah, you can catch that article over on oriolesonthebirds.substack.com. We'll get in now to our best tools for pitchers. And the first category is best fastball. And I know for myself that I thought that this was the most competitive category. There were 5 or 6 different pitchers that I thought had really strong cases of being recognized here. And I had to really carefully weigh all of these guys. So, Bob, I'll start with you. Who do you have as the pitcher with the best fastball in the Orioles farm system?
Well, I almost went with one guy for 3 different categories here, and I ended up not going with the fastball. So I will leave him for one of you guys, I'm assuming. But the guy I ultimately went with was Patrick Riley, who was acquired for Billy Cook from the Pittsburgh Pirates at the trade deadline. A sneaky great trade that we made amongst many. That day was crazy. But Riley, I think you've seen maybe you haven't, but you should check out the YouTube video from Tread where he's like, all right, they're trying to get him to ramp up his velocity, and like every pitch is a little bit higher and higher, and then he hits 100. Like, he's got an incredible fastball that he can lead with and work everything off of. And I just think it's like it might not be the best pure fastball as far as velocity or hoppiness, but again, I don't know the data. Maybe it is too, but I just think it's the whole baseline of his game. So I think it works well enough where if he's a starting pitcher, he's going to be a guy that can go to the fastball as a weapon. If he's a back end reliever at some point, I mean, I think it will be a weapon there as well. And he's got other pitches too, but the fastball to me leads them all as far as I'm concerned. I'd love to hear what you guys think.
I want more trades like that to happen this coming year, and I think we are going to see a few more like that with this big Rule 5 class. But I know Billy Cook is a Rates and Barrels icon right now. I think he was 9 straight episodes he got a mention. But when you play for the Pirates, and there's not a whole lot offensively, you get your love over there. Patrick Riley is a great one. I wanted to go with Riley. There's a lot of great articles out there about his fastball specifically and his whole repertoire. So I'm pretty stoked to see what the Orioles do now that they have this whole offseason getting their hands on him. But I probably took the low-hanging fruit here, and I'm going to say Keeler Morphe, mostly because of the velo. Like, when you average, he's 18 years old, 17 years old. When you're averaging 97.5 miles per hour and you're touching 100 multiple times, and not just early on in the outing either. This is into the 3rd inning. As a 17-year-old kid in the Dominican Summer League, he was still touching 100. And you can throw it for strikes at that age. I went with Morphe. I would love to see. He's a smaller guy, but I imagine he gets some pretty big extension. The Orioles, these smaller pitchers, these smaller pitchers that the Orioles draft and turn into starters, they've got big extension. They're super athletic. Keeler Morphe is extremely athletic. Yeah, I think this pitch is going to be pretty, and it may not even be his best pitch, I think, based on some other writings. So I like Keeler Morphe's fastball, though, and I'm excited to see how many guys he can carve up this year with that pitch.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. And what was I going to say? Tim Lincecum Jr., I think, with his height, and he's going to be an ace. It's destined to happen.
I considered Riley. I considered Morphe. I considered Zach Fruit. Also took a good long look at a few other guys, but in the end, I went with Chase McDermott. And the reason I picked McDermott for this category is that I would argue his fastball is the most well-rounded. It's not necessarily the hardest. He's typically about 93 to 95, but he's able to maintain that consistently and fairly deep into games too. It's also got excellent hop to it. And when he is in the zone, hitters just don't square up on it. For a guy that's that much of a power pitcher, he doesn't have an issue with home runs. He really does a good job of minimizing hard contact when he's throwing strikes. And I know that there's still, I think, an unsettled debate right now over whether or not he ends up in the rotation or in the bullpen. If he ends up in the bullpen, it's not going to be because he can't maintain his fastball velocity. He does a really good job of that. He'll end up in the bullpen either because that just happens to be where the greatest need is, and he goes there, he excels, and he's never moved out of the bullpen, or there's concerns that the command is just never going to quite come around for him in the rotation. But the fastball, I think, is already big league quality, and it's just such a good, well-rounded pitch.
Yeah, he was in contention for mine as well. I mean, we talked about it after we first traded for him, how at least from the camera angle that we were watching in Aberdeen, like it looked like the ball moved up as it got to the catcher's mitt. So love the Chase McDermott fastball. Say what you will about Keith Law, but he had an awesome line about Nestor Erman's fastball in a recent article where he said it looks like he's chucking pills of aspirin at hitters, which was pretty cool. For a different angle, Cameron Weston doesn't have the velocity. It's like 92, 94, but it's a two-seamer, and batters pounded into the ground. Kind of similar with Luis De Leon from the left side, 93, 95, but gets a ton of ground balls. So many options.
Yeah, the only thing that held me back with McDermott was it's just his ability to routinely stay in the strike zone with the pitch, because it's so frustrating. And we were talking about this, when we talked about McDermott last year, and it was a fun game. Most nights it wasn't fun. Some nights, I'll say, not most nights. Some nights it wasn't a fun game. But you can look at Chase McDermott's final box score line if you didn't watch the game when he was down there in Norfolk, and you pull up Baseball Savant, you could guess exactly what percentage of his fastballs he was throwing in the zone. And when it was a bad night in the box score, it was like 30%, sub 30%. He's throwing that pitch in the strike zone. And when he's throwing it in the zone 50, 60% of the time, he's throwing 6 innings, no runs, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts. Like, it legitimately is some of the best stuff in this organization. It might be the best stuff in the organization, I think, when it's in the zone. But he is an older prospect as well. And I know it's been an issue for a long time. He's had stretches where it was really, really good, and then he would regress. Then he really, really good, and then regress again. But he's older. Yes, he's in the major leagues now. But with control and command, like that is still something that is fixable and teachable, even where he's at in his development. So I'm very curious to understand like what the Orioles' plan is with McDermott, because I would love for them to just put him in the bullpen and throw him in, the 7th, 8th inning. I think he could just eat it at that spot. But I'm becoming more and more convinced that the Orioles see a lot more with McDermott as a possible starter with this team.
Let's go now to best changeup, and this is another fairly competitive category. You've got a few pitchers that have really standout changeups in this system. So, Nick, I will start with you. Best changeup in the Orioles farm system.
I'm going off the board because I want to talk about him, even if this is the last time. I'm going Carlos Tavera. I'm sticking true to my guy. That changeup is the filthiest pitch, one of the filthiest pitches I have seen when it was on. And when he was in AAA alone last year, it had 18 inches of movement. So when you talk about a fall off the table changeup, that is Carlos Tavera. It is a fall off the table changeup. 35% whiff rate in AAA last season. For comparison, I don't know if either of you guys are going to say Cameron Weston, but Cameron Weston had a 40% whiff rate with his changeup in AA last year. So compare Tavera's 35% in AAA. 105 stuff plus, 60-65 grade pitch. This would be really cool. Now I'm thinking about this. We messed up by not preparing for this like a week ago, and we could have all the visuals, have all the pitches loaded up for people watching live. That would have been a lot of fun. That's why I love Carlos Tavares' changeup, because when that thing is on, it is one of the more unhittable pitches in this organization. Say what you will about his overall prospect status, I agree, but that changeup is one that will live in infamy in my mind.
I love the off the wall pick. I went with Keeler Morphe, who, if you just look at his Baseball America page, 70 grade fastball, 60 grade changeup, 60 grade sweeper. Gotta love it. But the changeup in particular, 90 to 92 miles per hour with significant run. And this is a guy that's attacking you with a fastball that's routinely upper 90s, touching 100. And he has a changeup that's low 90s, like Edward Cabrera-esque, with significant run. I just don't know. And he's got a sweeper that's apparently could be the best breaking ball of our minor league system as well. Like, I just don't know how, if this guy has any control as he starts to get a little bit older and move up the system, I don't know how he could be I don't know. He could be like best pitching prospect since Grayson Rodriguez potentially, but I love the changeup, and I want to see some of that sweet action in Aberdeen when I get there some point this year. So Keeler Morphe for me.
I went with Cameron Weston here. That pitch, just first of all, the movement on it is not something you see every day with the changeup. But Nick just mentioned it, 40% whiff rate. He consistently gets it in the zone. And I think it's why, a big part of why he is so successful despite not having premium velocity with his fastball. Part of it is his command, which, spoiler alert, I'm going to talk about in a little bit here. But the other fact, too, is that I think hitters have a hard time differentiating when the ball is coming out of his hand, whether or not it's a fastball, whether or not it's a changeup, whether it's that splitter fork ball kind of thing that he throws, whatever it is. The arm action on it is so good. It has such excellent movement, and he's consistently, from what we can tell, because we don't really have access to this full data just yet, but it seems like he's consistently in the zone with the changeup. So I went with Weston in this spot.
Can we just highlight one more thing about Weston as a quick reminder? Cameron Weston was receiving late last year comps to Brady Singer. And say what you will about Brady Singer. Yeah, okay, he's fine. We'll see what he does at Great American Small Park this year. But when you're an 8th round pick out of Michigan and probably viewed as more like a relief prospect, to get Brady Singer comps, I think that speaks to just how underrated Cameron Weston is in the system.
Yeah, Weston's up there. I think at one point I've heard his changeup was compared to new Yankee Devin Williams, the airbender style changeup from a different arm angle. I mean, that sounds incredible. And that was when it was thought that maybe he would just be a reliever long term, but last year proves he could do this as a starter for sure. So yeah, Weston is a great pick as well. I think Luis De Leon, we've heard, again, great things of his changeup from the left-hand side. That's kind of similar to Morphe's with the significant run, maybe not quite the velocity. I don't know. Many people throw 90-mile-per-hour changeups, but that was another one I considered.
We'll go now to best breaking ball, and we're really kind of using this as a catch-all. We could rate someone's curveball here, rate their slider, rate their sweeper, whatever breaking ball, the pitch of that mold that stands out to us is what we'll consider here. So, Bob, going back to you, who do you have for best breaking ball?
Best breaking ball. Again, there's quite a few options here with these pitchers. Orioles don't have pitching. It's a thing, but we have plenty to choose from. I went with Trey Gibson just because I think, I don't know, his slider is pretty silly, and I want to shout him out because he's got like 4 average to above average pitches, the slider being the best. It's like a mid-80s slider, but it's got some great action on it. And yeah, that's my guy for this category.
I'm going Trace Bright's curveball. I think that's a big league pitch right now. 3,000 plus RPMs. It's that 12-6 shape that is so aesthetically pleasing. More than a 50% whiff rate in 2024. I think the fastball was fairly easy for me. I think breaking ball was the toughest one for me. But I see a big league pitch already with Trace Bright. I would love if Jackson Baumeister was still in this organization. I know he would have won a couple of categories, I think, for me, but he's not. And so Trace Bright's curveball. That's the pitch for me.
Those were both good choices. I again considered multiple options for this category, but in the end, I'm going with Edgar Portez's slider. This has been lauded by Baseball America, among other outlets, for its unique ride sweeper shape. And while the command still needs to get a little bit better with Portez, he has made pretty significant gains in that area in the last 2 years. So you factor in the shape and the velocity, which is pretty good, pretty consistently low to mid 80s, sometimes getting into the upper 80s with the pitch. It's really, really effective. And it's why I think that Portez has gone in the last 2 years from being a young, interesting arm that's kind of a wild card with a lot of question marks beyond the fastball to a much more refined pitching prospect, and one who, if he continues down the track that he's been on the last 2 seasons, I think is going to develop into a major league starter. The changeup is a pitch that needs the most work right now, but the fastball and the slider put him well on his way there.
Yeah, no, they're good. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
I was just gonna make an AJ Preller joke. AJ Preller salivating over here. Maybe Edgar Portez Rule 5 eligible. If you want to, Michael King, Dylan Cease, whoever you want to move, we got a good one over here.
Yeah, that's a great choice. I was going to mention Keeler Morphe sweeper, Zach Fruit slider, Chase McDermott slider, Nestor Herman slider. So, yeah, plenty of options.
We'll go now to best control. I kind of teased my selection for this category, but again, you've got a few pitchers that are in the mix. Nick, who do you have for best control?
I'm saying Nestor Herman. Just like you get promoted to high A and you post a 3.1% walk rate. Yeah, that was in a small sample size, but that's just kind of insane. Overall, between low A and high A, it was a 5.9% walk rate. But 2 underrated names here to throw out there. Blake Money has fantastic control. And I remember very early on in one of his games, I know they were talking about, I think he faced one of his old LSU teammates, and the broadcaster was like, all right, give us a scouting report on Blake Money. What are you going to see tonight? And it was, he throws a lot of strikes, which he does. And Braxton Bragg struck out 122 hitters and walked just 22 in 96 innings last year. And no one knows who he is, not the other Braxton Bragg. So, yeah, both those guys are really great at commanding the strike zone, but Nestor Herman, man, it's a special arm.
Yes, indeed. I went with a more veteran guy who I think because he has good command/control, it makes his stuff play up and work better. And that's Brandon Young, who had a fantastic season last year, worked his way up to being right on the cusp, right on the verge, I should say, of major league time. I mean, 2023, he comes in, obviously coming off of the injury, has a 0% walk rate in very limited time in A and high A, 5.8% in double A. And then last year had a 4.5% walk rate in double A before he was promoted to triple A, and had an 8.8% walk rate, which is including the ball strike system, the challenge system, where you saw way more walks for pitchers as they got to triple A. He was able to work with that. He doesn't have that one pitch that's like amazing. Obviously we had, who did we have on again? We had the guy.
Oh, Lance Bresnowski.
Yes. We had Lance Bresnowski on, and he was talking about his inverted break, how it was so good at double A, went a little bit down in triple A, but he's got like a 50 grade fastball, 50 slider, 50 changeup, 50 or 55 changeup, excuse me, 50 cutter. So he's got like a bunch of average ish, maybe slightly above average pitches, but because he can command and control where he wants it to be and pitch sequencing, he makes it work for himself, as we saw last year. So Brandon Young is my selection.
Those are both good choices. I went with Cameron Weston, so he gets a second nod from me. What jumps out at me about Weston, and I touched on this earlier when I was talking about his changeup, he has such a broad pitch mix, and it doesn't feel like there's a pitch that he can't get into the strike zone. And he has done a really good job throughout his career of keeping the walks low. He had a 6.6% walk rate at Bowie last year, which was the best of his career at any level to this point. Otherwise, he's pretty consistently been around 7% outside of a kind of high walk rate that he had at Aberdeen, or high by his standards, over his short stint there this past season. But his command is so good, and I think it's again a reason why he has really shot up prospect rankings in the last couple of years, and should hopefully be in AAA this year. And as long as he's able to make the adjustment to the automated ball strike system, I think it's going to continue.
Going back to Young for one more second, I'm convinced that 8.8% walk rate. I remember somebody reaching out after when he got added to the 40-man roster and like, any concern? He walked 4.5% guys in AA, and then he walked 8.8% in AAA. And I will say absolutely not, because that's still way lower than what he was walking, pre Tommy John surgery back in 2021. And I will say this again: he had one outing in AAA where it wasn't a huge sample, so he had one outing where he walked 4 guys, and that was the outing where it was announced that he was like extremely sick and probably shouldn't have pitched that night. So how low should that walk rate have been for real in AAA if he was healthy for that outing? That stood out to me. So I think Young, he's proven it with the AAA ball. Yeah, that's some of my hesitation with Young, is all of those elite numbers that were originally highlighted by Lance in his Substack and then coming on the podcast to talk about it. Yeah, they get diminished a little bit with the big league ball in AAA. And yeah, the control, we see the walks go up with a lot of these guys with that ABS system. But I think Young did a really good job of counterbalancing that when he got to AAA himself. So,
yeah, like you said, that one game where it really is an outlier on his season. And plus, like I mentioned, the ball strike, how many times have we heard Chase McDermott? He's not as wild as you think. He's always right around the zone. But if it wasn't for this, robo umps, then his walk numbers would look so much better. I think it's probably similar for Young. Another option that I thought about here was Alex Pham. I know he's got a similar type of thing as Young, where he's got a bunch of average to slightly above average pitches and always right around the zone. So that was another option for me.
We'll wrap this up with best pitch mix. And in this category, we're really just looking across the board at what pitchers have repertoires that, from their fastball to their changeup to their breaking balls, maybe even a cutter, which we know the Orioles like to teach, what stands out the most. So it's not necessarily about who's the best pitching prospect or who has the best single pitch, but just across the board, whose pitch mix do we like the best? And I will let Nick start this one.
I'm going back to Nestor Germán. 5 pitches. Every single one of his pitches ranked in the 85th percentile or higher in whiff rate. All 5 offerings have a 50-plus grade on them. He's not a sleeper anymore. The fantasy community is well aware of him. The national prospect rankings are all shooting him up their rankings, top 10, and a lot that are coming out here lately. So the secret is out in Nestor Germán. And yeah, another line, again, hate to do it, but shout out to Keith Law. As Keith Law mentioned in his write-up that he released today, outside of the shooting aspirin with the fastball, he also said, if he can convert this to the next level, he said it's not back end starter stuff. It's like, AKA, this is the top of the, maybe not top of the rotation, but this is a guy who could be a 2, a 3. He's somewhere close to the top of major league rotation if all goes right for Nestor Germán. And the kid, look up his numbers at University of Seattle, where he came from. They produced a pretty good guy in Tariq Skubal, but look at his college numbers. If Nestor Germán, all the praise he's getting we've been highlighting him for months and months and months. But when the national media really starts to take note and highlighting just how good of a pitching prospect this is, and it's not just Eric Longenhagen now, it's Keith Law, it's Baseball America, it's literally everybody. I don't know if MLB Pipeline's come out with their top 30 yet, but we'll see what they have to say about Germán. But it's everyone that's come out the list so far is so high on Germán. When the Orioles draft these pitchers and they got a 6 ERA or their number, you look up their college numbers, like who are these guys? Oh, their college numbers suck. Michael Hayes can't draft pitchers. You're wrong. Like this organization is doing a fantastic job of identifying pitchers with elite stuff that moldable clay that they are turning into pretty fine pitching prospects.
Absolutely. Yep. And speaking of that, my pick, Michael Ferret, who is another later round pick who has tremendous stuff and a great pitch mix, a great arsenal. He's got 2 different fastballs that range from 55 to 60, depending on what grade you want to give it, a 4-seamer and a 2-seamer. He's got 2 sliders that are average to above average, a sweeper and more of a gyro slider. He's got 2 changeups, which you could grade at a 50 to 55. He's got a slider that grades around the same. So he's just got a bunch of plus pitches, like six plus pitches potentially, and decent control and command. And he's still super young. He's going to spend most of the year, I believe, at 21 years old this coming season, and can only imagine he's going to continue to improve. So again, another guy that could be a top 100 prospect by the end of the season by at least one outlet, maybe multiple. So yeah, give me Michael Ferret as the best pitch mix.
I considered a few guys for this category. I considered Michael Ferret. I actually took a long look at Zach Fruit here as well, because I think that his pitch mix has really come a long way in the last 2 years. But I agree with Nick. I'm going with Germán because the fastball looks like a big league pitch, and everything in his arsenal right now is just working for him. He commands the pitch as well. And this is something from Baseball America. His curveball had a 22% swing and miss rate, and it might not even be his best breaking ball. It's debatable whether or not the slider is actually better than the curveball. And that tells you a lot, that someone that can generate a swing and miss rate of 22% with a breaking ball, and it might not be their best one. So it's really a good pitch mix. And I agree with everything that Nick said. He's jumping up national rankings for a reason, and you're going to be hearing his name a lot in 2025.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Big fan.
A pitcher who we're not going to see this year, we didn't see last year, we're not going to see this year, who I think probably would have been a pick of one of ours in at least one of these categories as well. Like Kiefer Lord's still here. We have yet to see Kiefer Lord, and he has some pretty tremendous grades on his stuff as well. And then I also thinking about, diving into this a little bit more in preparation for tonight. You talk about best breaking ball, to go back to that for a second. Like I would have 2 years ago, I don't know if we've done this every year or not, but I feel like Carter Baumler was on this list as well. And hopefully he gets some innings this year and can finally stay healthy. Like the pitching, when you really dive into it and breaking it down like this, yeah, we talk about the pitching prospects in the system a lot, but it's got me even more jazzed up diving into some of these guys and their specific pitches a little bit more. It's every single night. We're a couple weeks away. Every single night, turn on MILB TV, and you're going to be able to watch a pretty fantastic pitching performance from an Orioles minor leaguer, I think.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm most excited about, honestly, this year, the international guys, and continuing to watch the pitching. And another name to watch, even though he hasn't pitched professionally yet, Chase Alsop. I feel like, he could have been a contender for any of these categories if we would have got a look at him late last season. So we're in a good spot here.
Absolutely. That does it for this look at best tools. We broke down hitters in our last episode, and we broke down pitchers in this episode. And we'll have plenty more coverage for you leading up to spring training, as we're getting close to pitchers and catchers reporting in the middle of February. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to our Patreon community and sign up to become a member today at the $3, $5, or $10 levels. It's not too late to get in on the top 50 prospects countdown. We still got a ways to go there. And of course, once you sign up, you'll have access to all of our prior recordings from that countdown and plenty more bonus coverage to come during the regular season. For Bob Phil and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by Bet Online and part of the Believe Podcast Network.